So what should be at the top of government's priority list, and how must this budget respond to South Africa's pressing economic and social challenges? Let's speak to Azar Jammine, Director and Chief Economist at Econometrix, and the South African Federation of Trade Unions General Secretary Zwelinzima Vavi, as the country is preparing for this crucial fiscal moment. And of course, remember, Wednesday, Enoch, Godongwana, the Finance Minister, will then be tabling the 2026 budget speech in the National Assembly. A very good evening to you both, and thank you so much for your time. Let me start with you, Mr. Vavi. The debt to GDP near 78%, elevated debt servicing costs, and economic growth projected at around 1.5, 1.8%. What should be the focus of this budget as far as the workers are concerned?
Well, Bogwe, let me start right where you are. The debt of 78% to the GDP is not our biggest concern. The biggest concern of workers and the poor is, what is the government borrowing the money for? What programs that it is driving to ensure reindustrialization of the economy, building of the infrastructure that is collapsing left, right, and center, our schools, our public hospitals, our police stations, our correctional services centers, and even our army is not in the state that reflects a country with such level of resources. Our concern, which cannot be about government chasing to achieve a surplus. The president was beating his chest in the State of the Nation address. You cannot be talking about a surplus in a country with these massive developmental backlogs. We are in short, or we have a backlog of 3.7 million houses in South Africa, plus 80% of our schools do not have laboratories, do not have libraries, let alone to talk about access to data and to things that you need today to communicate and to form part of the fourth industrial revolution.
Doc, let me
think that our priorities are totally upside down as the country. Our priority number one for any budget, for any economic statement, ought to be about economy, growing the economy, ensuring redistribution of wealth from the rich to the poor.
Doc, in part, some of what Mr. Vavi says there, I know you said that you couldn't hear him, but he speaks about the priorities that seem to not be where they should be, but also saying that you can't talk about a surplus in a country like ours, where you still need, a lot of development, but also at the same time, the issue of debt servicing costs is also another area of concern. For you, what should be some of the priorities for the minister this week?
Well, the very objective of trying to run a budget surplus is to try and bring down debt servicing costs, because the lower that the debt servicing costs are, the more money is available to be spent on development. And that is precisely what the Government of National Unity has been succeeding in achieving in the last year or two as a result of the program of fiscal rectitude. We have seen inflation declining to around 3.5%. The rand has strengthened, and that has helped the inflation go down. But the rand has strengthened because foreigners are now building up confidence, renewed confidence in South Africa's fiscal stance, and are buying up South African government bonds. Not only foreigners, local businesses as well. And the result has been that the long-term interest rates have fallen by some 3% in the past year, thereby reducing debt servicing costs. And the government is going to save around 30 billion rand this coming year from paying less interest on its debt than previously. So it is succeeding in that regard. But Mr. Vavi is quite right. Development is absolutely crucial. And for development and job creation, what is vital is increased infrastructural investment spending. Now, year after year, the government has proclaimed that it has already secured commitments for large-scale investment spending. The budgets themselves have also incorporated increases in investment spending that are higher than increases in other outlays. But we have not seen that translating into increased spending, in investment spending in practice. The ratio of fixed investment to GDP has continuously fallen. In the third quarter last year, there was a slight improvement in investment, but for the first time in 2.5 years, one only hopes that that is a turning point.
So, Doc, I'm going to ask both of you to stay on the line, pause for a second. It seems the gremlins in the system might be making it difficult for both of you to hear each other. All right, I do think now the two of you can be able to hear each other, so we can be able to then continue the conversation. Thank you so much for your indulgence to both of you. So, Dr. Jammine, you were talking about the fact that when there's a surplus and the debt servicing costs are low, we can at least have a bit more money to be able to look at some of the investments. And then you speak about, of course, some of the people, not only South Africans, who will be watching this budget speech, right? We're talking about investors, we're talking about businesses, we're talking about households. What do you think they'll be hoping to hear from the minister?
I think they'll be hoping, the investors will be, possibly not Zwelinzima Vavi, but the investors will be hoping to see a continuation of the kind of policies that were announced in the medium-term budget policy statement in November, because that actually proved to be quite a turning point in the recent history of business sentiment in South Africa. The general view was that the government was really, under the GNU, was really committing itself to fiscal rectitude. And the next thing we found ourselves, our credit rating upgraded by Standard & Poor's for the first upgrade in nearly 2 decades. The next thing we saw the rand strengthening fairly dramatically. Inflation has come down to just over 3%, in line with the government's new inflation target of 3%. And the effect of all this has been that hopes for interest rate cuts have improved, and we have seen long-term interest rates, which determine debt servicing costs, falling very sharply. And over the past 9 months or so, they have come down by more than 3%. That implies a huge saving for the government when it draws up its budget announces its budget on Wednesday, in terms of reduced debt servicing costs. It will create additional space for developmental spending that previously wasn't there.
And Mr. Vavi, all of this, right? I mean, because we even heard from the State of the Nation address, for example, around the wins in energy, in logistics, and the interest rates and all of that. But households are still under pressure. You still have people who are struggling to make ends meet on a daily basis. And those are some of the people who are hoping to hear some positive news for just their own households, I suppose.
The framework that the good Dr. Azar Jammine is articulating there is exactly what has brought the South African economy to its knees. With 42% unemployment rate, with nearly half of the black population unemployed, with 64% of the black youth unemployed, with water cuts and infrastructure collapse in the richest province of South Africa, in Gauteng, worst of all, to talk about water crisis in other parts of South Africa, with budget cuts on health, education, army, police, correctional services, with Home Affairs that only have 37% of the staff that it needs to ensure that we comply with the national legislation, and to ensure government have capacity of ensuring that not anybody can willy-nilly come into the country without any kind of documentation. It is the framework that have made South Africa the most unequal society on earth as we speak. It is the type of a framework that have led to 62% to live below the upper bound poverty level of 1,558 rand, according to the University of Cape Town. It is that type of a framework that will be celebrated in Washington amongst the mythical investors, but who are not going to stand up and to be voted come the elections this year and another elections in 2 years to come. It is that framework that have totally discredited the ANC government and that have made the poor, 2/3 of them, to refuse to participate in the elections, because that framework have simply reproduced the crisis we inherited from the colonial and apartheid system. It has not worked for 30 years. It will not work for another 30 years. And we're urging government to give up on a framework that is making it so unpopular amongst its own voters.
So, Doc, while you respond to that, please also add, what does he say about municipalities? Because one of the points being raised here is the issue around water, right? And the crumbling infrastructure and all of that. Municipalities have once again come into the spotlight as far as this is concerned. So what does he say to help us at least get out of the rut that is the lack of service delivery there?
The reason for the lack of service delivery, for the increase in unemployment, impoverishment of our country, doesn't lie in government policies. It lies in the absolute rape of the country's financial resources over the last decade and a half by people who've been put in authority, who have used their positions of authority to, through corrupt means, to steal money from the government. That is not due to a lack of funding that's available. The funding has been removed, and it's been removed fairly cleverly through state-owned enterprises, which have been penetrated in a program of state capture. Mr. Vavi himself was on record as talking about the hyenas eating at the trough at the moment, and that has contributed towards a lot of this decline. It's not the government's financial policy that has had to kind of adapt to all this money being stolen away from it. Criminal activity is rife. It is bleeding this country. And then the second aspect is not enough has been done to educate the majority of people in this country, to enable them to add value in the productive processes. What we have seen is the complete deindustrialization of the country. The third element has been the impact of cadre deployment, especially at municipal level, which has seen people who are not competent enough to take decisions on how to, and to employ people on, to enact the maintenance work that is needed to sustain a decent service delivery. And that has declined because of a decline in the capacity of local governments to actually execute what they're supposed to do.
Mr. Vavi, your eyes went wide. You were not on camera, but I could see that when your name was mentioned, your eyes went wide. What happened?
No, I am in total agreement with every aspect of what the good doctor is saying. All of those issues that he's mentioning did make a very important contribution to the state of local government we find in so many of our towns as we speak. But he is not telling you the full truth. The full truth is that in addition to his list, the government has been cutting transfers from the central or national government to the local government. In a country where already many of the local governments are losing valuable tax base because of deindustrialization. I should have mentioned also that we have lost 50% of our manufacturing capacity between 1994 and to date. And to date rather, only 10% of workers employed in this economy are employed in the manufacturing sector.
All right.
It has been nearly disseminated because of government policies, thanks to them. So yes, there has been corruption. Yes, there have been wrong deployment. Yes, there have been all of the things that I'm mentioning.
Okay.
But the underlying crisis is the fact that government have been cutting the budgets to local governments.
So I'm hoping then to get the full truth from both of you post the budget speech and see then what your thoughts are. But thank you so much for talking to us and giving us your expectations ahead of the Finance Minister's budget speech. And that was Dr. Azar Jammine, the Director and Chief Economist at the Econometrix, as well as the South African Federation of Trade Unions General Secretary, Zwelinzima Vavi.